Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaskar, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on an interesting journey to explore the intersections between numbers and narratives. After learning all the strategies and techniques for critical thinking within data science, today I want to go in an orthogonal direction, something that is related to what we have been discussing and at the same time slightly new to our vocabulary and our focal point. I want to talk about ethical reasoning in data-driven contexts. This is where we start looking at the validity and the reasonability of our practice from an ethics point of view. At the same time, we also understand why this is not an arbitrary concern. It happens to be a core quality that we need to develop as data scientists, analysts, and communicators to ensure that our messaging reaches the right audience and they also care about the kind of analysis that we are offering them. At the same time, we also must ensure that the analysis itself is ethically sound. So, in all of these complex networks, we will make our way through understanding what are ethics, why are they important, and what role do they play in our practice within data science. So let me begin with a clear definition. What is ethical reasoning? Ethical reasoning is the process of thinking through what is right, fair, and responsible in situations where your choices affect others. In data contexts, it means asking who could be harmed or excluded. Are we transparent about our assumptions and risks? Is our solution fair and inclusive? All of these questions will force you to think about the impact that your analysis and recommendations have on real people and real lives. That is why our approach, both intellectually and practically, needs to be right, fair, and responsible. This is why it is not only an arbitrary topic. It affects serious consequences that are born from our analysis and our recommendations. Ethical reasoning is not always about finding the perfect answer. It is about careful, thoughtful decision-making that balances different perspectives. It is not a problem to be solved. It is not a crisis to be mitigated. It is just a perspective that we need to keep in mind and view every data-driven decision through to ensure that our practice does not put anyone in harm's way. Here's an example for you. Let's say a city deploys predictive policing. This is where there are surveillance systems installed and preventive tests are being done on likely criminals to ensure that there is no criminal activity in future. This system is known as predictive policing. The ethical reasoning behind a predictive policing model asks these questions. Who is being monitored more than the others? Are any communities being unfairly targeted? And is there a fair appeal process? If there is a misdirection or a mistake being done at the part of the technology, can somebody appeal for justice? Is there any bias within the reasoning model? All of these are parts of ethical reasoning. And this is why ethics in data science is not an add-on topic. We are not studying this just because we are inching closer towards the conclusion of our module. We are studying this because it is central to how we design, analyze, and communicate data. If not for this, we seriously run the risk of putting hundreds of thousands of people in harm's way. Every single life that our analysis affects and touches is potentially at risk if we have not thought through what that analysis means and what it can do. Ethical reasoning is about ensuring that the decisions we make with data are just, responsible, and mindful of impact. As data scientists, we often work with personal and sensitive information. We also work with predictive systems that affect real lives. For example, job screening, healthcare, policing, all of these are technologies that data scientists often work with. They build algorithms, they build models, they build predictive technologies that help assign different value systems to different variables. And in this case, there are models that can encode bias or exclude certain groups. So to ensure that our model does not commit any of those mistakes, an ethical standpoint becomes essential, non-negotiable in our perspective of data. Here's an example for you. An algorithm predicts loan default risk. Now, if it is trained on biased historical data, it might unfairly deny credit to people from marginalized communities, even if the model is technically accurate. Once again, I must remind you that this topic is not about arriving at the right answers. This is not about arriving at perfect solutions. So even if your model is technically accurate, it runs the risk of being insensitive. It runs the risk of discriminating against people who may not have the privilege of having a strong credit record. This is why it is important to have ethical reasoning, apart from technical accuracy as well. Now that we have understood the foundations of where we are going forward with this, I want you to reflect on this question before I move on to the next topic. Think of a time when a technology decision that you saw or heard about raised an ethical concern. What made it troubling? Why did you worry about it? Think about who was put in harm's way. Who was it discriminating against? All of these are questions worth asking and questions worth considering while making our decisions and technologies. Think about it, and I will come back to you with more background on why ethics matter within data science. I want to spend some time thinking about ethics and technology. This is a growing concern because let's reflect on this together. Ethics ensures that all the people are treated with a just perspective, something that is fair, something that is their right. And at the same time, technology believes in rapid progress. It believes in effective acceleration. And obviously, there may arise instances where both of these factors are at odds with each other. Some technological innovations and advancements may not consider entire populations at once. So, this conflict between ethics and technology often leads us to think about how we can reimagine the technology itself to be more ethical. You might have seen that every big AI project these days has a wing that considers its ethical repercussions as seriously as possible. Every big tech company hires ethics researchers to audit their models, to check if their models are biased or unfairly treating their testing audiences. As a result of this entire practice, we at large are ensuring that technology is centered around ethical and moral fairness. That in the pursuit of, to quote the early day example of Facebook, move fast and break things, in pursuit of this vision, we are not sidelining anybody who may benefit from that technology, but due to the inherent bias of technology, is being pushed to the margins. From social media to facial recognition, technology has outpaced regulation in many of these areas. What do I mean by this? Regulation takes some time to catch up because lawmakers, policymakers need to sit down and think about the ethical, legal repercussions of new technologies emerging. So, with each of these innovations, lawmakers and policymakers may take some time to let the innovation play out, to see who is being affected, how are they being affected, and then come up with a model code of conduct, a set of guidelines that can help us understand how to use this technology really well. But that does not mean that technology itself will wait for the next innovation to hit the market until the last innovation has been matured. So, from all of these different areas that we just discussed, you would have seen that people are struggling to make laws and policies aligning with the rapid advancement in technology. As a result, biases in AI systems can reinforce discrimination. Privacy breaches can affect millions of people at once. Lack of accountability can allow harmful outcomes to go unchecked. All of these are serious ramifications of the law and policy side not catching up with the technology advancements. And in our field, in data science, all of this compounds at once because our analysis must empower ethically sound decision making. If we are to talk to lawmakers and policymakers at one hand and technology innovators on the other hand, we are in charge of ensuring that both these threads, often at loggerheads with each other, should understand the other's concern. And that is why an ethically sound communication, an ethically sound reasoning leads to ethical decision making, be it on the technology side or be it on the policy side. Whoever it is that you are communicating to, technical or non-technical, we must understand the seriousness of the task at hand. With that background, let's move on to structures for ethical reasoning in data science. The first structure happens to be a recap of our audience analysis model, stakeholder analysis. You can ask, who is affected by this data decision? Who benefits and who might be harmed? Have all the perspectives been considered? All of these questions will lead you to a clearer understanding of the ethical standpoint of your analysis. For example, you design an app to track employee productivity. Stakeholder analysis reveals that employers gain data-driven insights, but employees may feel surveilled or unfairly judged. Users might not know how their data is being stored or used. This is an ethical quandary. This is a problem. So our communication and our design of the model needs to reflect and start considering these issues to embed within the design itself. Here's an exercise for you. List 3 stakeholders for a facial recognition system used in public spaces. What ethical concerns might each of these stakeholders have? We have learnt about technical and non-technical stakeholders in our previous module, so think about it. Who are the technical stakeholders? Who are the non-technical stakeholders? Who is being affected by this model? And what ethical concerns might each of these stakeholders have? List them down and check what kind of ethical nuance it brings to your problem. The second structure is known as the FAIR test. The FAIR test is a simple checklist to help evaluate decisions. FAIR, of course, is an acronym, FAIR. The F stands for fairness. You can ask questions such as, are outcomes equitable across all groups? Is the effect of your analysis or your model equal across different groups? The A stands for accountability. Who is responsible if something goes wrong? The I stands for impact. What are the long-term effects of this model? And the R stands for respect. Does this protect user autonomy and dignity? For example, a university uses an algorithm to predict student dropouts. Let's do a FAIR test of this algorithm. F, fairness. Does it work equally across socioeconomic groups? In a university, many socioeconomic groups are represented in the student community. So, does it work equally across all of them? A, accountability. Can students challenge the prediction? And who can they approach if they want to challenge the prediction? I, impact. Are students at risk of losing their career prospects? If a wrongful prediction is made, what kind of ramifications are the students going to face? And R, respect. Are students notified or consulted in the process of designing this model? This is the fair test of the entire algorithm that the university would implement. This is not to say that the algorithm itself is invalid. However, it is important that before the rollout, all of these things are taken into account. This is both critical thinking and logical reasoning in action right here. The third structure is an ethical scenario mapping. You can use this approach when considering new features or decisions. You can describe the proposed action and imagine different outcomes. For example, the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and the likely case scenario. And for each of these, you ask ethical questions at each stage. Who is helped? Who is at risk? And what happens over a period of time? In the best case, worst case, and likely case, each of these scenarios are tested with these questions. For example, let's take the proposed action as launching a data-driven parental rating tool in education apps. We have seen the rise of many mobile-based, computer-based education technology apps even in India. So let's see if you are being placed in charge of launching a data-driven parental rating tool in any of these education apps. What could be the best case scenario? The best case scenario is parents are better informed about child learning. The worst case scenario is that the children feel pressured or unfairly judged. Therefore, the ethical question to ask in either of these cases is what protections are there for labeling or misuse. If anybody wants to flag a concern, are we implementing a feature that lets them raise a flag, raise an alarm, and say that this feature is being misused? This feature is not being used for the purpose that it was intended to. This kind of reasoning ensures that all stakeholders are taken into account and a best practice is being introduced to ensure that your feature runs smoothly and for the purpose that it is designed for. Here's a quick exercise. Pick a feature, it could be an engagement score for students, for example, and use the three-step scenario as a map to evaluate what kind of scenarios can emerge and what questions should you ask at each stage. I have just given this as an example. You can pick any feature in any app. Could be a social media app, could be a tool, could be a convenience app, could be a food ordering app. Pick a feature and test what kind of scenarios emerge. What kind of ethical questions will you ask? At this stage, I understand if you might begin thinking that all of this is before the writing process, meaning all of this is at a temperamental, perspective, intellectual level. It is. You are not wrong. However, I must emphasize that it is not only limited to a temperamental thinking process. As we have discussed, everything we study collectively finds an underlying effect in our writing, the actual words on the paper as well. So let's see how we are bringing ethics into writing and communication. Ethical thinking should shape your writing as well. In fact, it does show in the language that you use, as in, you avoid biased or judgmental phrasing. It shows in the tone that you use, the tone of being transparent and cautious with claims, something that we have studied in our previous lectures. It also shows in the structure that you have used. For example, you might add sections that acknowledge limitations, biases, trade offs. It also shows in the visuals that you have used, that you will not exaggerate trends or you will not hide any context. You will come clean, you will be fair, and express everything that may be necessary for the reader to learn about the model that you are presenting. For example, the first sentence is poor phrasing. Our algorithm predicts who is most likely to succeed. However, a better phrasing would be, the model estimates likelihood of success based on historical patterns. Results may reflect past inequalities. You are not only clarifying what the purpose of the model is, you are also clarifying the methodology and limitations at the same time. This right here is how ethical reasoning starts reflecting in your actual writing output. So, we have not only discussed ethical reasoning as a process, but we have also seen it as a product. Here's a reflection question to consider at this moment. Why is tone just as important as accuracy when communicating ethically? The judgment, the bias, the assumptions, all of these are part of tone. Why do you think that regulating it properly is important when communicating ethically? In the end, I must emphasize that ethics is a habit. It is not a set of rules, a set of commandments that we must follow because it is arbitrary to follow them. It is something that we imbibe into our perspective and help it build with time. Ethical reasoning does not mean that you will never make a mistake. It is not a foolproof mechanism by any sort, but it creates a habit of questioning, caring, and adjusting. In fast moving data environments, that habit right there is your most powerful tool for creating responsible, inclusive, and impactful work. That was it from my end for this lecture. We were discussing ethical reasoning, a new topic, an orthogonal topic, but something that should be crucial and central in our perspective of data science writing. I hope that it sparked new ideas and perspectives in our mind, and I hope that we will carry it forward whenever we are dealing with hard, complex data that has real world consequences. Because in the end, it is not models talking to models, it is people talking to people. In the next class, we will begin inching towards the conclusion of our module on critical thinking and logical reasoning. Until then, stay curious, keep learning. All the best. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaskar.